In the Level 2 Functional Skills English reading exam, there are going to be one or maybe two questions that ask you to compare and contrast the views or opinions of two or more people on a particular subject. Now, if we're going to stand any chance of picking up points for this question, we've got to have a really good understanding of what we're being asked to do when we're asked to compare and contrast. So let's take a look at an exam question that asks us to compare and contrast from a practice paper. This question says, compare and contrast the views of Eddie with those of Moira on the importance of obtaining insurance before travelling. Now, it's a really long question, and there's a lot of potential for us to make mistakes if we don't understand the question. So in order to get to grips with what we're being asked to do, I'm going to break this down into three parts. And in the first part, we're going to read and understand the question. Now, if we look carefully, we can see that this question actually has three parts, and we'll look at those each. Now, if we look carefully, we can see that this question actually has three parts, and we're going to look at each one of those three parts individually. And the first part, the very opening part of the question, is asking you to compare and contrast. So I'll underline those words there, and I'll put a number 1. Now, a lot of learners get a little bit confused by this idea of comparing and contrasting, because it's kind of weird language. It's not language we use in everyday life. But if we can understand what these two words mean, and crucially, if we can remember it on the exam day, then we're in with a fairly good chance of picking up all the points for this question, because it's relatively straightforward if you know what you're looking for. The word compare actually means, in the context of the exam, if we're asked to compare the opinions, we're being asked, what do these people agree on? So compare means, what do they agree on? And if compare means, what do two or more people agree on, what do you think contrast means? Exactly, it means the opposite. Contrast is asking us, what do these people, what do they disagree on? What do they disagree on? So there we have the first part of the question, slightly demystified. Now, we're being asked to compare and contrast. We want to be writing about what certain people agree and disagree on. But in most reading papers, you're going to have the opinions of lots and lots of different people. And we can't be comparing and contrasting all of those people, so it has to be narrowed down. And that's where we need to look at the second part of the question. Whose views and opinions do we need to be comparing and contrasting? And in this case, it's the views of Eddie and the views of Moira. So when you're answering this paper, if you compare and contrast beautifully the opinions or views of people other than Eddie and Moira, you will get no points, unfortunately, however well you do this, because the question is specifically just asking about these two people. Now, when you read through the paper, Eddie and Moira have probably got views and opinions on a whole range of subjects. And if you had to compare and contrast everything that they've said and expressed an opinion on, you'd be there all day. So we need to find out what subject or what topic that they're discussing is it that we need to be looking at. And that's when we come to the third part of the question. We need to compare and contrast their views on the subject of the importance of obtaining insurance before travelling. And that is the third point. This brings us on now to step 2. And step 2 is use scanning to find the relevant information. Now, you might have heard of 2 reading techniques that can help you find the information that you need in a piece of text really quickly. And those techniques are called skimming and scanning. Now, we use the technique of skimming if we want to just get an overall idea of what the piece of text is about, something we call the gist. We just want to get a notion of what the text is talking about, we would use skimming. If we wanted to read the text in order to find some specific information, some keywords if you like, we would use a technique called scanning. So if we're online on a TV schedule, we wanted to find out what time a particular TV program, like Dancing on Ice, for instance, started, we would use the technique of scanning, looking for the start time. Or if we were on a supermarket home delivery website and we wanted to find out what it cost to have some food delivered, we'd use the technique for scanning because we're just looking for the keywords. In the case of these examples, the time that a TV program starts, and in the example of the delivery, how much the delivery costs. So those are our two reading techniques, skimming and scanning, that we can use to find information really quickly. And we need to use these in the reading exam because we don't have a lot of time and there's a lot of stuff to read. The question alone is massive. And then we're going to have 2 or 3 texts that we need to be looking at as well. So now we know about skimming and scanning, which technique do you think would be the most useful for us to find the information that we've been asked to compare and contrast in the question? Would it be skimming, looking for the general idea, or scanning, looking for specific information? I agree with you. I think it would be scanning. We're looking for relevant information. And what are the key words that we will be looking for when we're scanning through this text? Well, we've been asked to compare and contrast the views of Eddie and Moira, so we're going to be looking for their names to start with. We're looking for Eddie's name in print, and we're looking for Moira's name as well. So once we've found Eddie's name, we don't want to get just the gist of his opinion. We want to find out specific information, and the keywords we'd be looking for there would be importance, perhaps, or importance of obtaining travel insurance, or we'd be looking and scanning for the word travel insurance and the word travelling. So we'd be looking through the text in order to find these keywords, both for Eddie and for Moira. Now, let's have a look at an extract of some text right now. My partner and I have just returned from a fortnight skiing holiday in France. We took out travel insurance offered by the travel agent, and when my partner slipped and broke her ankle, we assumed all medical costs would be covered. How wrong we were. The small print excluded winter sports, something the travel agent never pointed out, nor did he mention the E11 form, which I've never heard of and which would at least have covered some of the costs we incurred. The moral of my story is never trust travel agents when it comes to insurance, and always read the small print. Alternatively, don't bother with insurance. And scan down until you find the bit where Eddie gives his opinion on the importance of obtaining travel insurance and highlight it. Now, let's look at another extract, but this time with Moira's opinion. My son went hiking in Austria this summer and unfortunately contracted a nasty virus. He had to spend 4 days in a hospital and was so poorly that my husband and I had to travel to Salzburg and bring him home. On my insistence, my son had taken out an expensive travel insurance package, so all medical and travel costs were covered, and we only had to pay the excess of £150 on the hospital fees. Although he had an E111 card, I think this only covered him for medication in Austria and not for medical treatment. Some people seem to be suggesting that travel insurance is a luxury you can do without. What nonsense. Okay, so before we go to step 3, let's recap what we've covered so far. We have done step 1, read and understand the question. Remember, that was made up of 3 parts. What does compare and contrast mean? Whose opinions, and on what subject? We've also done step 2, use scanning to find the relevant information. We talked in step 2 about the 2 reading techniques, skimming and scanning, and we decided scanning would be the one we used. Now we're on to step number 3, and step number 3 is to write your answer. Write your answer, obviously, but we're going to write the answer in 4 sentences. Now, mostly the compare and contrast question carries 4 points. So in order to get all those 4 points, we need to give 4 pieces of information, and this is how we'll do it. The first sentence will involve giving Eddie's opinion. And it's going to be his opinion on the importance of obtaining travel insurance, not his opinion on the value of Kentucky Fried Chicken over Subway sandwiches. Remember, they want this specific information. The second sentence, we need to give Moira's opinion. Again, on the same subject, that of the importance of obtaining travel insurance. This is going to get us 2 points if we answer these in this way. The third sentence is to compare. And remember, by compare, we mean what do they agree on? What do they agree on? And it's going to be quite easy for us to do now, because we've got Eddie's opinion written in our first sentence. We've got Moira's opinion written in our second sentence. And here we're simply extracting the parts of those sentences in which they agree with each other. That's comparing. And then you've probably guessed it. For the fourth sentence, we're going to write down what they disagree on. So that is the contrast part. What they disagree on. So just to recap, step 3, write your answer in 4 sentences. These are the 4 sentences, or rather this is the content we need to include in our 4 sentences in order to get the 4 points for this question. So there you go, your maximum 4 points for the dreaded compare and contrast question, which we tackled in 3 stages or in 3 steps. The first step was to read and understand the question. Whose opinions do we need to be writing about, and on what subject? Step 2, use scanning to find relevant information. We don't have time in the reading exam to be reading every single word, so we're going to use the scanning reading technique to find the information that we want quickly. And step 3, write your answer in 4 clear sentences. That way you're going to pick up the 4 points maximum for this question. Easy, right?